Hi, so for this week's video assignment, I wanted to kind of go off of the assignment that was due this week, the assignment 5, where we did the test using the data analyst in Excel, because I've never seen that, I guess, extension of Excel. I never knew that it was there or that you could turn that on to use. And what I'm talking about is the Excel data analyst, and it had the t-test paired 2 samples for means, which we used, and then the t-test 2 sample assuming equal variances, which we also used, and then the t-test 2 sample assuming unequal variances. And I don't think we used that one. I think we could have either used the equal variances or the unequal variances. I did the equal variances. And then it also had a z-test 2 sample for means, which we didn't use, but I wanted to look at those and kind of learn more about those and what they are specifically. So just as like a recap or a refresher, a t-test is any statistical hypothesis test in which the test statistic follows a student's t-distribution under the null hypothesis. And then also a refresher, the null hypothesis is a default hypothesis that a quantity to be measured at 0. That's another thing that I don't know if I was getting correct in this week's assignment, comparing the null hypothesis to an alternative hypothesis. I think I understand it, but when I was writing it, I think I don't know if I made it too simple. For that assignment specifically, the null hypothesis would be that there is no difference between how voters feel about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And then I think the alternative hypothesis would be there is a significant difference between how voters feel about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I don't know if that's too simple or if it's supposed to be that simple. And then also, so I know the null hypothesis would be that there is no difference between how voters feel about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. But then for the alternative hypothesis, can it only be there is a significant difference between how voters feel about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, or could it also be that there is not a significant difference between how voters feel, or is that the same as the null? No, because the null would be there is no difference, and so an alternative would be there is a significant difference, and could also be that there isn't a significant difference. I don't know. I see, that's where I'm getting confused, because if there's a difference but it's not significant, does it still count as a null hypothesis? Or not, because the null hypothesis is there's no significant difference, or there's no difference. And so if there is a difference but it's not significant, where would that fall? That's where I'm still confused at. Anyway, the t-test 2 samples for means, it determines if 2 population means are equal. And it's a common application used to test if a new process or treatment is superior to a current process or treatment. So just seeing if, if you're doing one thing one way, you would use this test to see if the new way is going to be better or worse. So you can test that to see if you, before you do a whole change, if you want to do that. By paired, it means that there is a 1-to-1 correspondence between the value in the 2 samples. And then the next test under that data analyst would be the t-test 2 sample assuming equal variances. And this is used to test data to see if there is a statistical significance or if the results may have occurred randomly. And this one I was interested, because when I was looking into that one, it says it's the least likely to be used in Excel, but it didn't say why. And then we did use it, so I don't know why that would say it's the least likely to be used in Excel. And so I wonder if more often people are just doing the t-test 2 sample assuming the t-test paired 2 samples for means and then doing the t-test 2 sample assuming unequal variances, or if it's just not one that they use a lot. But it didn't say. But I was curious as to see why that one's not, like, it's the least likely that someone would use. And then the next one would be the t-test 2 sample assuming unequal variances, and that's the null hypothesis is the two population means are the same, but the two population variances may differ. The unequal variance t-test reports a confidence interval for the difference between two means that is usable even if the standard deviation differs. So that was interesting. I'm still confused. I understand the difference between the t-test two sample assuming equal variance and then the t-test two sample assuming unequal variances, and it might have been talked about in the video for this assignment for this week, but I don't get how for the test that we ran what the difference would have been, and how come, because I'm pretty sure in the video it said that we could do either. So what would have been a big difference if we, like, if I compare my assignment where I did use the equal variances to someone else's assignment where they did use the unequal variances? Are they interchangeable? And that's why the equal variances is the least likely to be used? Or I'm just confused on how come in the assignment we could do one or the other. Is it, I don't know if it's like a big difference or if they're kind of the same, or if it's like kind of the same test but with a different point of view. I don't know. And then finally, the last thing talked about in the last option in the data analyst in Excel is the z-test two sample for means. And I don't know if we talked about it in this class and maybe I missed it, but I didn't know what a z-test was. I thought it was only a t-test. And so a z-test is any statistical test for which the distribution of the test statistic under the null hypothesis can be approximated by a normal distribution. They test the mean of the distribution, and that talks about, I looked up because I was curious, the difference between a t-test and a z-test and like when you would use one over the other. And it said that a z-test is used when the sample size is large or the population variance is let me read that whole thing again. A z-test is used when sample size is large or the population variance is known, and then a t-test is used when the sample size is small and the population is unknown. So I understand the difference, but I really can't remember if we learned about the z-test or if we would even apply the z-test in this class, or if it's irrelevant because we always know the population variance. I don't know. And then that was just talking about what the t-test is and when you would use, or the z-test, and when you would use the z-test over the t-test or vice versa. And then the option in the Excel data analyst is the z-test two sample for means, which I'm assuming it's essentially like the t-test two sample for means, just one's with a t-test and one's with a z-test, obviously. But it said it runs a two sample z-test means with known variances to test the null hypothesis that there is no difference between the means of the two independent populations. So I'm pretty sure it's like essentially the same thing, just one's with the t-test and one's with a z-test. So yeah, that's all I had for this week. I'm curious if other like Excel, or not other Excel, other Microsoft, like Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, have more, I don't know if you would call it an extension, more extensions you could use to make them easier to use, or if maybe Excel has more of like the more functions like the data analyst that you can use that aren't known really, because I didn't know until this class and I don't think I ever would have known if it wasn't for this class. So I'm curious to see if there are more of those. So yeah.